Hello, welcome to the self-learning podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on block 5, urbanization and its impact. Unit 15, level, trends and patterns. Urbanization is commonly understood as a process by which an area and its population assume urban character or features. The population census in India accords urban status to a settlement when at least 70% of its male workers are engaged in the non-agricultural sector, and when it satisfies some other standards regarding size and density of population. When an area grows in size, density and heterogeneity and assumes urban social, cultural, economic, ecological, physical and political features and declared as urban by the state administration, it is called urban. Some ideal type features which are generally taken as urban include non-agricultural occupations, a big size population in a given area, high density of population, social and cultural heterogeneity of population, large scale division of labor, and economy based primarily on industry, commerce, tourism, concentration of facilities like modern communication and transportation, banking, education, health, sports, courts, administration, concentration of urban civic amenities like power and water supply, sanitation, garbage clearance, parking, market complexes, parks, playgrounds, community halls, theatre halls, and similar other facilities for public use. Urban association based on contractual relations rather than kinship or primordial relations. Erosion or breakdown of traditional values and norms and rise of new set of values, morality and norms which are rationalistic in nature, and a municipal or corporation administration with provisions of democratic decentralization and urban citizenship. Such general features of urban are called ideal typical because there is no fixity or concreteness of the levels in these features to be called urban, and even in the absence of some of these features, a particular area could be accorded urban status. Urbanization is actually a process where a non-urban area becomes urban and a less urban area becomes more urban by assuming more and more of these features. In the process of urbanization, the urban people or urbanites and the new entrants of to the urban center get tuned to urbanism or the urban way of life. It is, however, debatable if there is any particular way of urban life. The non-European sociologists and anthropologists have argued that the characterization of urban, as has been done above, is primarily Western and suffers from Western ethnocentrism. Empirical studies of African and Asian urban situations have confirmed that there could be non-Western modes and levels of urbanization as well, where each country would have their historical and contextual specificities. and some degree of continuation of their cultural, social, and political traditions, and the level of economic and technological developments could also be different. The traditional social and cultural forms are expected to continue in the urban areas. The level of civic amenities, the physical looks of the cities, the structural arrangements, the level of consumerism would also be different from those in the western cities. Although the influence of western modernity or post modernity in the cities of the less developed countries could also be felt. Now let us move to the next point, urbanization and levels of urbanizations concepts. The level of urbanization is often defined in terms of proportion of urban population to total population. This measure of urbanization attaches great value to human and social dimensions of urbanization as well. There are, however, two more important measures of urbanization. The first one is that the towns serve the rural people in terms of socio-economic change, and the larger the rural people served by each town. On an average, the lower the level of urbanization. Alternatively, when no rural people are left to be served by town, urbanization is taken to have reached its zenith. The second measure of urbanization concerns the distance that the rural people have to cover to reach the nearest urban center. The greater the distance, lower the level of urbanization, because since a situation would mean urban centers are fewer in number and distance between the urban centers is quite high. In a state with well developed urban network, people cover smaller distances to reach the urban centers. Now let us move to the next point, urban growth in India trends. Put again, the level of urbanization in the world, India's urbanization level is still low, although urbanization has gained some speed in the post-independence period. From the 1990 data, we can see that 42.7% of world population was living in urban area. There was wide gap in the level of urbanization between the more developed regions, which had 72.7% of the population as urban population, and the less developed regions with only 33.9% of urban population. Among the continents, Europe, Oceania and Latin America had a very high level of urbanization with 73.1, 70.9 and 72.3% of their population as urban population respectively. In contrast, Africa with 34.5% of its population as urban population and Asia with only 29.9% of its population as urban population were the least urbanized among the continents. Again, among the Asian regions, Western Asia is more urbanized, with 58.2% of its population living in urban areas than Eastern Asia, 29.4%. Southeastern Asia with 29% and South Asia 27.8%. Thus, South Asia, of which India is a part, is one of the least urbanized regions of the world. According to 1991 census, only 25.72% of India's population was living in urban areas, which again is less than the South Asian standard. The annual growth rate of urban population in India has declined from 3.1% during 1981 to 91 to 2.7% during 1991 to 2001. The decade 1971 to 1981 had recorded the highest annual growth rate of 3.8%, but the last two decades have recorded deceleration growth rate in India. The percentage of urban population has gone up from 23.73 in 1981 to 25.72 in 1991 and finally to 27.78 in 2001. The slow growth of urban population in India goes against popular notion of urban explosion and against the most expert predictions. The Planning Commission 1983, the Expert Committee for Population Projections for the 8th Plan, and the UN Study of World Urbanization Prospects 1995 and 2001 had predicted 3 to 4.4% annual growth of urban population in 1980s and 1990s. The UN projection of 3.2% growth during 2000 to 2010 and 2.8% during 2020 to 25 also seem to be unrealistic. Keeping in view the growth rate of total population is expected to be less than 1%. According to UN projection, it would require a very high rate of rural-urban migration to meet the projected level of urbanization. By way of explanation to the sluggish growth of urban population, the scholars argue that not only the natural growth rate of urban population had declined, but also the city-bound migration of both male and female population has decelerated over the years. A study in 1983 suggests that contribution of rural-urban migration to urbanization declined over the decades and stood to 22.6% in the 1980s. During 1971 to 81, the percentage of intersectional migration in urban areas declined from 18.5 to 16.9, and that of lifetime migrants male from 33.6 to 32.4. The share of lifetime interstate migration came down from 11.2% to 10.0%. The 1991 census also recorded further decline in urban-bound migration rate. In the 1981 to 91 decade, the decennial lifetime interstate migration rates were 11.7, 26.0 and 8.0 respectively. The female migration to the urban areas, which takes place primarily due to social and cultural factors, also slowed down during the decade. Amitabh Kundu has identified 4 major reasons for the growth of urban population in India: natural increase, growth of new towns outside agglomerations, merging of towns and jurisdictional changes in agglomerations and rural-urban migration. Available data suggests that the natural increase accounted for 61.3% and 59.4% of the total increase in urban population in 1971 to 81 and 1981 to 91 decades respectively. The 1991 and 2001 decade too experienced a decline in natural growth rate of urban population. The share of component growth of new towns outside agglomeration in the total addition to urban population has declined from 9.4% in 1980s to 6.2% in 1990s. This indicates that the rate of urban growth outside the existing agglomerations and the urbanized regions has slowed down over the decades. The third component, that is the extension of municipal boundaries, merging of old towns or inclusion of new towns in the existing urban agglomerations, was considered a minor contributor to the growth of urban population in the 1960s, 1970s and 1980s. The number of towns merged with existing neighbor towns was only 221 in 2001, and in 1991 the number was half of this. However, the share of this factor to the growth of urban population went up from 7.6% in 1991 to 13.0% in 2001. The contribution of the fourth factor has been estimated to be 21% in 1990s, which was marginally less than the figure for the previous decade. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the self-learning podcast.